Yeah, so let's start. Yeah, so just like quickly, what I've been doing so far. So I am currently working in Meta. I'm based out of London right now. I work in ads, and my team is responsible for generating about 10% of total ads revenue. So it's approximately like $13 billion, which we are kind of responsible for. Previously, I was working with Amazon. I was working in Prime Video Commerce organization. I've also co-founded my startup before that. I'm originally from India, so this startup was based out of Bangalore. Um, I worked like both in 0 to 1 startups and also MNCs. I've worked with startups like who didn't even have Series A funding, and I've also like worked with some big companies as the likes of Amazon and Meta. Off work, I love playing cricket. I love playing chess. I mean, I love playing any kind of sports, but primarily cricket and chess. Uh, and mentoring and teaching is something which I'm really passionate about, and that's the reason. I mean, I'm on various platforms, and I keep sharing like whatever I am learning, and also keep like learning from others as well. Um, yeah. So, so what's the agenda for today? Basically, what are FAANG companies? Why like do we kind of make these companies as one of the goals for us? Is it even worth it or not? And then kind of going about like how do we kind of start? Where do we start our journey? Let's say if somebody is very new to the whole programming world. Uh, and he doesn't even understand where to start from, then basically I'll be like taking from like the basic step, learning the fundamentals, and then preparing for interviews, and then one of the most important things I think is kind of making a good resume, and then kind of how can we kind of land up interviews with any of these FANG companies, and then and if there's any additional tips which I think these are like very personal tips which I have found helpful, and I'll share with you as well. uh, yeah. So what and why FANG companies? Like this is like a very, I think, no brainer kind of thing. Like FANG stands for Facebook, Apple, Amazon, Netflix, Google. So these are the five companies which comprises of like the FANG word. Uh, the reason like these companies are so chased for, or these companies are so like popular, is because uh, they are big companies, like they have good software engineering practices. You get to work with really smart people, and then the benefits, the perks, and the compensation, I mean, they are very lucrative and very competitive. uh, so yeah, I mean, that's the reason. I mean, these companies are kind of admired for, and all of the software engineers kind of want to crack these companies. Um, yeah. So I think the first step, whether it be any company, I mean, let's say if it's not even FANG, if it's any company, uh, the first step should be to pick up any language. Like you can this is like there is no good or bad language over here. You can pick up any language. It could be Java, Python, C++, whatever. Like, I mean, it could be PHP or any other language which you have already been writing code in, or which you think, okay, I mean, I kind of love this language, or I mean, I think this language is easy and I can just pick this up. So just pick up any language, and then the second step is to start learning the basics of it. So, I mean, it's as simple as how do you define, let's say, a variable in some language? How do you write, let's say, if you want to write a hello world program, right? So, how would you do that? And then, I mean, there are various materials which are available online, um, and there are various books. I mean, one of the books which I read when I was just starting was Cracking the Coding Interview. It's very beginner friendly book, and you can just like kind of give it a read. It gives you algorithms, and then why did you kind of approach particular things in a certain way. There are various online platforms as well, Geeks for Geeks, Coursera, MIT, and nowadays, like I mean, many people are also like doing a lot of programming videos on YouTube. Um Yes. So, I mean, once you kind of get familiar with the basics, you think that, okay, I mean, I can write a very basic program. I can write a for loop. I can write, I know like how to write lists. Uh, yeah, Miles. Okay. Was there any question or, okay. I will just continue. So feel free to write your questions in the chat and I will just answer it.
So,
So, yeah,
were
go
you
on.
saying something? Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yeah, I heard you saying my name. I'm sorry. Did I say something?
No, no, no. I just thought like you raised your hand in the chat, like, but it was a. I mean, I didn't see the time. Sorry for that.
Oh no,
Uh,
I was just saying hello.
yeah,
I'm sorry. So,
cool, cool, cool.
okay,
Yeah,
cool. Continue. I'm sorry.
awesome. Uh, yeah, I mean, as I was saying, like there are many online materials nowadays on YouTube as well, and I mean, if let's say there's something very specific which you are looking at, then you can just like uh, go through some good YouTube channels. Um, Yeah. And then, I mean, once you learn the basics of it, I think the next step is to kind of start learning some basic data structures, uh, which means, let's say, how to define an array or how to, uh, yes, yes, I mean, so I think you pronounce your name as May, right? uh, you're saying like I feel that learn the basics is not enough for FAANG interview. The interview questions are far more complicated than the basics. Yes, you're right. I think this slide is aimed for people who do not have any background in programming. So I mean, this is this. I'm not saying like this is the only thing which you need to be doing in order to be able to give a kind of stint at a FANG interview. This is how you would start. Let's say if somebody who doesn't understand anything about programming, right? So that's what this slide is aimed for. Yeah, and the next question is, what are your thoughts on languages that aren't too common like Haskell? To be honest, I haven't used any functional languages apart from Kotlin. But yeah, I mean, if you find coding in Haskell easy, why not? I mean, what's the I don't see any reasons. I mean, sometimes, so I personally haven't seen any company of these like FANGs, or like the order of FANG, which asks for a specific language. Uh, you are free to code in any language as far as you are able to kind of solve that question. So whether it be in Python or C++ or Haskell, as far as I know, I don't see any restrictions on the languages which you are using in the interview. Um, yeah, I hope that answers your question, Francisco. Um, then Fang is out of the question. Uh, can you just like, I mean, is that a question or is that something which you want to ask? May Okay, it's a statement. Can you just like type the whole question?
So my point is, by learning the basics doesn't help with the FANG's interview questions, because I was once asked about uh, this design a Netflix
Hmm.
system design. Yeah, that is not a basic questions for
No, no,
a.
absolutely. I mean, I think what you're talking about more is like a system design question, and I will cover those aspects as well. Like how can you kind of start learning about system design and coding rounds and stuff like that. But as I said, like this is basically for somebody who doesn't understand programming at all. This slide is not I mean, is not the only thing which you need to do in order to crack a FANG company. This is just a starter thing. and I'll cover up like in my next slides what you are kind of discussing. Um, yeah. So once you understand, I mean, let's say once you understand what's a language, you are good at some language, you understand the basics of it, then we will start getting into like a bit more kind of FANG specific interview preparation. So the first thing is kind of preparing your resume, and then I'll talk about the general structure of FANG interviews, and then like how should you be doing your interview practice, like the DS Algo interview practice. Then there's another kind of round which is targeted on your behavioral rounds, and then I mean I'll also cover like some elements of mock interviews and how you can benefit from it. Yeah. Yes. So I think these are a very high level points which I think are important. One is like you should have a one pager resume. Uh, don't try to like put in everything onto your resume. Just put like very uh, like your most impactful projects with respect to your companies. We don't need to kind of put everything. uh, then I mean, when you're putting up your projects, then also try to quantify your impact. uh, like basically, let's say if you worked on some project which increased the number of users, right? So how many users did you increase? If that project kind of brought in some revenue, so how much revenue did like you contributed towards? Or maybe like if let's say it's a very technical project and then it's more like a migration thing or something like that, or you're building a new API, then you scaled to some X users, or you reduced the latency by some percentage, or let's say you reduce the complex, or you reduce the capacity by some amount. So always kind of try to quantify your projects or your contributions with some numbers, because I mean, one of the one of the very like one of the facts which I was reading online was that HR does not spend more than 1 or 2 minutes on a resume. uh, so if there's like a lot of English or like a lot of words on your resume, it is a possibility that it might not be like read properly. So it's important to just highlight your contributions with numbers, and then like just tailor your resume with keywords which are relevant to the JD. So let's say you are applying for a specific job description, read what the JD requires you to be doing, and then put in some keywords or tailor your resume to make an alignment of the resume with your with what the job requires you to be doing. And I mean, let's say if you have any GitHub profile or a LinkedIn profile, then you can supplement all of that information in your resume as well. Any questions on this? Okay, cool. So yeah, so I mean, now I mean, this is more like FANG specific things. So uh, typically, I have seen this kind of a structure for almost all the companies. So you would have an initial phone screen round, which would typically be around 30 to 45 minutes. And what they would do, this is an HR call, probably like, and in the HR call, they would try to assess your experience so far, what you have been doing, what kind of projects you have been working on, what kind of languages you are working on. Um, yeah. So and then basically, um, and sometimes I mean, for example, Google, they tend to ask some, I mean, not a coding question per se, but it's more like a basic understanding of time complexities and some sorting algorithms. So they would kind of ask you some 5 or 6 questions just to understand, okay, do you cross, or do you have a basic level of, I mean, expertise in order for you to be going to the technical phone interview. But Amazon, Facebook, I mean, they don't ask you any coding questions in the initial phone screen. It's mostly the HR trying to understand what you have been doing, and the HR then telling you what the role is about, and what the interview process would be like. And this is your chance to ask the HR. I mean, any questions that you might be having regarding the interview, or how you should be prepping about the interview. Um I mean, so all sorts of things. I mean, you can just ask the HR about the whole process. So once the phone screen is done, they would send you an email, or they would just ask you on the call, and then you would submit your availability for a phone interview. So once you do that, I mean, then there would be like a technical phone interview, which would be around 45 to 60 minutes. And here, typically, they would ask you two coding questions. That's what I have seen. And if, let's say, you can solve two, then maybe they would ask you a third as well. But typically, it's like two DS algo problems, and you can. I mean, what I have seen is like it's mostly medium to, like, uh, I mean, early hard sort of a difficulty, lead code like difficulty. So the expectation for you is to be able to solve. I mean, if you solve both of them, that's great. If, let's say, you solve one, and then you are able to kind of give uh, the correct approach for the second question, I think that's still okay. um, and I mean, it depends entirely how your conversation goes in the phone interview. But the challenge, I mean, I've seen in these phone interviews is to be able to solve these two coding rounds, these two coding questions in the given time span. Like, if you have to do everything in 45 minutes, you can imagine 5 minutes just a general know-how being spent, and then 5 minutes you can leave for Q&A, like basically any questions you want to ask, and then the interview might ask you, and then you're left with 30 minutes, like 30-35 minutes. So in those 30-35 minutes, you have to solve two coding questions, right? And that means that typically you have around 15 minutes per question. So 15 minutes per question means, like, I mean, then you have to kind of think about it. You have to ask some more questions regarding the question. I mean, you might spend 2 to 3 minutes, 5 minutes just trying to understand the question. So you're left with 10 minutes where you have to code it, and then kind of go through a dry run, and stuff like that. So, I mean, it's all about speed, how well practiced you are, and then how quickly you can just kind of solve these questions. And my recommendation is not to, I mean, let's say if you know the question, you don't need to kind of give any non-optimal approaches. Always go with the best approach, like the most optimal solution which you know, and try to quickly solve it, and then move on to the next question. So yeah, I mean, that has been my strategy in these questions. I Yeah, I mean, and then once you kind of go through the technical phone interview, then the and let's say if the interviewer gives a green signal, then you go to the on-site interview rounds, and those on-site interview rounds are typically 4 to 5 rounds. And the way these 4 to 5 rounds are distributed is mostly, like, I mean, two rounds which are DS algo, and then one round would be on system design, and then another round would be on behavioral questions. I mean, something like this. So two DS algo, one system design, and then one behavioral. And I'll cover like these rounds in more detail in my upcoming slides. And then, I mean, if, let's say, you are interviewing for a senior role, then maybe there would be some more behavioral rounds, and more like questions from higher up the org. Uh, yeah, I mean, now regarding the length, it's typically 4 to 8 weeks. It depends entirely on you. I mean, how comfortable you are with DS Algo, with your system design practice. Um, I mean, you can schedule all these interviews in one day, or you can break the interview process in two stages. One could be, let's say, two rounds on one day, DS Algo, finish it. Then another day, let's say after a week, you can go for system design and behavioral. So it's entirely up to you. I mean, how comfortable you are, and what level of practice you have, and then based on that, you can just schedule your rounds. And then, I mean, once all your interviews are over, I think within a week or 2 weeks, like you would probably get like some news about what how your rounds went, and then I mean whether you're selected. I mean that's great. They would follow up with compensation and your joining date and all of that stuff. If let's say it's you didn't go through, then they would probably give you some feedback. Um, but I mean, I don't think that's very helpful because in general the companies are not allowed to give you any feedback. So I mean it's a I mean I don't like that, but it's the way it is. um, yeah, and then yeah, I mean I've covered the slide. If there are any questions, I mean just let me know. Otherwise we'll move on to the next slide. Cool. So okay, I see there are questions. Okay, just a minute. Okay, I'm sorry. I was actually reading the chat. There's a Q&A section as well. Okay, so one of the difficulties, should I create a standard? I think there's a Q&A round, so probably I'll cover these questions there. But if there's anything which is related to this slide, let me know. Yeah, cool. So moving on, um, coding interview prep. So as I said, like start with easier data structures like arrays, strings, linked lists, and then progress on to the more complicated topics like trees, graphs, recursion. Um, I think one of this is a very what do you say? Um, like I have not seen many people trying to like make some patterns, but I think if you start looking at patterns with certain questions, you will be able to quickly understand what data structure you need to apply for that particular coding question. Yeah, so if you fail in an interview, how long should you wait to apply again? Or can you apply again in another country? Are there differences between countries? I don't think. I mean, as far as I know, there's a cool off period, and typically that cool off period is from 6 months to 1 year. This information can be like easily accessed on Google, but yeah, it's mostly from 6 months to 1 year, and I don't think like there's any country barrier per se, as long as they're able to trace you back with your email ID or phone number, or I mean some other attributes. I don't think country is one of the parameters for saying that okay, I mean you interviewed from India, so and now you can interview from London as well. So that's not how it works. It's like per person there's a cool off period. Yeah, and there's no difference between countries. I think one of the good things about like these FAANG companies is their uh, their interview processes does do not differ from country to country. I mean, they have a very standard process, and they have a very language agnostic process. So, I mean, let's say if you know Haskell, and even if Haskell is not being used in any of these FAANG companies, then also, I mean, knowing like some language, knowing Java per se is not a requirement per se. Like they wouldn't ask you any language specific questions. So it's a very standard process, same across all the companies. Uh, you just need to kind of be solving pure data structures and algorithms in any language and be able to kind of solve system design and behavioral rounds. That's it. Yeah, cool. So when I moved to the coding interview, yeah, so I was talking about these patterns, and this has helped me personally. I mean, what I typically do is I try to identify, oh, this talks about nodes, so maybe this question might be related to graphs, or this question has something to do with maximum k or like minimum k. So maybe I mean I would use heaps over here. So this is how I try to map some problems to a specific data structure, and it helps me kind of quickly just start kind of thinking about the logic and not thinking about, oh, what kind of data structure I need to be applying over here, or whether it's a arrays question or whether it's a trees question. So I mean, I've seen many people just kind of ending up not using the right data structure as well, and then the follow up uh, logic and the follow up coding also gets very messy. So the first step to solving any coding question is to identify the right data structure which needs to be used, and then kind of thinking about, like, okay, I mean, this is how I will code it out. You don't need to like start. I mean, this is also another problem which I've seen, is like, you see a question, and then the moment you like get asked a question or you see a question, we try to start writing like the code on the computer. And I think this is not the right practice, because then you don't think about how you will be solving that question. So I mean, you should first, like, you should always have a pen and paper, and just try to kind of write that whole like logic on a paper. If you can just scribble through it as well, I mean, that's not a problem, but your entire, like, what you're going to code should be in your brain, and then and should be on the paper. Identify maybe like some edge cases, identify, okay, this, like, do just a dry run on the pseudo code, okay, whether this kind of, whether I'm getting the right answer or not. And once you're confident on paper, then you should start coding on the computer. I mean, I think this will save you lots of time, and also it will kind of force you to think before you start writing. um, yeah. So I mean, in terms of how you should be doing your interview prep. So there are many platforms available. I personally love LeetCode. I think I don't think you require anything else apart from LeetCode, to be honest. And you should buy the premium subscription. I mean, because um, so it lets you sort questions by company, and then you can also so it lets you uh, like categorize the filter the questions by company, and then you can also sort those questions by the frequency and difficulty. So what does it mean is, let's say if a particular question was asked, how many times a particular question was asked, and then, I mean, let's say if you're running low on interview prep time, then you can just go through the most asked questions, and then try to solve those first, instead of just trying to do everything at once and then losing out on some questions. Um, yeah, I mean, this is just a recommendation. Honestly, it depends on what level of practice you are, but start with easier questions. The reason being, I mean, it boosts your confidence. You feel more comfortable doing some easy questions, and then kind of working your way up to medium and hard questions. Uh, I've not seen companies asking a lot of hard questions these days. So, I mean, I think I've typically seen companies asking easier, like uh, uh, to medium questions. I mean, that's what the pattern I have seen, because you're short on time. So either it's one hard question or it's two medium questions, something like that. Um, yeah, so as I was saying, I mean, practice out loud explaining your thought process. uh, so I mean, this is again one of the things which I've seen myself when I interview people. So you give them a question, and then they would just not talk. They would just scribble on a paper on a computer, and then you don't even know like what they are thinking. And I mean, personally, like, interviewers are there to help you out. They're there to kind of uh, give you some hints, or maybe like correct you if you're going in the wrong direction. So it's always a good practice to uh, think first 2 to 3 minutes, like, okay, now you have some rough idea of how you want to approach this question, and then start discussing the question with your interviewer. So that way, I mean, and once he gives a thumbs up, then you should start coding it. I mean, rather than just start like jumping onto the question. And maybe like you're thinking you're missing on some edge cases, then he will try to tell you that, okay, I mean, do you think if, let's say, you were thinking in some other direction, you might be able to solve the question in a more optimal way. So that's your hint. I mean, so that means there's something which you need to think more. So it's always like try to kind of think out loud. uh, Review solutions only after attempting questions fully, focusing on improving speed and efficiency over time. I think, again, like this will only come with practice. The more you practice, the more you will improve your speed, and the more you will identify your edge cases, and then you will be like more efficient. So, I mean, I think if you typically do 2 to 3 questions on weekdays, and let's say 4 to 5 questions on weekends for about 2 months, I think it's a great. You will have good speed, and you will be like quite efficient as well. Um, yeah, I mean, you should have like a strong foundation of data structures and algorithms before advancing on to more complex interview questions, and then you can like filter questions by difficulty and on lead code, and then thinking out loud. I mean, this is just a summary of what the slides covers. Awesome. Yeah, so I can see some questions. Uh, yeah, if you interview and pass the phone technical one, but if they say the role is filled, can you do on site once they have a new role? Yeah, that's a good question. Actually, it really depends. I mean, I've seen this thing going on in COVID, when people who had already interviewed, they had got the offer as well, and then because the company stopped hiring in between, so they said like, okay, we'll just, I mean, stop the process for now, and they rolled back offers as well. I think what companies typically do is, like whenever they open up hiring again, so they will first reach out to you if you're still looking or not. And if, let's say, I mean, you are still looking and you are okay to join, then they will continue the process. I mean, so that's what I've seen mostly. But again, I mean, it depends on the company, and the best thing to do in these kinds of scenarios is to reach out to your HR and just ask, okay, like what's the status, and why this, and then, I mean, let's say if the role opens again, what would I get first priority or not? So you can easily ask these questions to the recruiter. Um, if someone is already working full time, how much time should they take to prepare for FAANG, starting with coding interview? Like, what should be the daily spend, and how many weeks and months? I've just briefly covered this. Um, so I think, from, like, if you're just already working, so you might not get like a good amount of time to work, to practice on your weekdays. So that's what, like, if you can just practice for 1 hour, 1.5 hours on a daily basis, I think that's really good. And on weekends, let's say if you can spend 3 to 4 hours, um, I mean, that would be great. See, I think I don't want to kind of put numbers around these things, because it really depends on an individual, how much comfortable he is with the questions. Let's say if you're comfortable, you might end up doing 4 questions in 1 hour. If you're having problems, you might end up doing just one question in 2 hours. So it really depends on your goals and how comfortable you are. uh, and then, I mean, just like how soon you want to kind of uh, start interviewing with any of these companies. What are some valuable questions to ask before you start coding? um, yeah, so I mean, that's a good question. I think the questions which should be asked is something around, let's say, um, how many users. I mean, these are probably more relevant for system design questions, but for coding rounds, let's say, what about duplicates? What about zeros? What about uh, some memory out of constraints, something like that. So it depends. I mean, so you can just kind of ask very ask questions which you think might be some edge cases, or related to the time complexity. So what's the time complexity which he might be expecting, um, or um, yeah, I mean, so these sort of questions where things can be a bit tricky. um, what are some valuable projects I can include in my portfolio that can distinguish me as a candidate? um, I mean, again, so it really depends on the job description, on the job profile which the company is looking for. If let's say somebody is looking for an ML engineer, and you just um, and if the project is not relevant, I mean, it doesn't make a lot of difference, right? And you wouldn't want to, like, typically what I've seen is like, um, people have already been doing some projects before they start applying. So I don't see like there's a cross relation between these projects and what the companies are hiring for. It's mostly your experience which you have been doing, and what projects you were doing, and what kind of impact you landed up, and that speaks volumes for it. I mean, you don't need to kind of do any specific project in order to be selected for FANG. Like, I've not seen something like that. uh, Again, like 3 to 4 hours for how long? I think again it depends, on how comfortable you are doing questions, um, and how soon you want to start interviewing. What's your bandwidth? And yeah, I think it primarily depends on each individual. Will you email the recording of the session? Yeah, sure, sure, why not? Yeah, this is being recorded, so I mean, this would be available after this thing as well, after this call as well. Yeah, moving on. Yeah, so I think this is one of the interesting slides, and I've not seen many people discussing about this, but I think this is one of the most important rounds when you are a bit more senior. I mean, so let's say if you are new, fresh out of college, 3 to 4 years experience, I don't think behavioral interview is going to be like one of the key rounds. But let's say if you are a senior engineer, or if you are like a more senior role, if you're applying for a senior role, then behavioral interview starts getting more importance as compared to your DS and algo. I mean, DS algo is important. There's like no question about it, but the major focus becomes on behavioral rounds when you grow higher up in seniority. So, what's a behavioral interview prep? Mostly, it's about your communication style. It's about the culture fit, and then storytelling. So what happens is like, they would ask you questions like, tell me about a time when you were left with some challenging situation, and then how did you go about it? I mean, something like this. So you would say that, okay, there was a situation where, uh, I mean, so and so was the situation, and then I did this, and then I took this action, and then this was the result. So so this is how typically you would answer these questions, and this is called a star method. So you speak about the situation, you talk about the task at hand, and then you talk about like what action you took, and then ultimately what was the result. And I can give you like few examples of behavioral questions. So tell me about a time when, let's say you are in a managerial capacity role, and then you had to give some critical feedback to one of your reportees. I mean, and how did you go about it? So, I mean, or like, let's say there was some project which uh, was running on tight deadlines, and then uh, one of the lead engineers on that project left, and then how you as a manager handle the situation, uh, and then how did you go about it? I mean, so these kinds of questions are typically asked, and now you can imagine, right? Like these questions, I mean, as they are not relevant when you are fresh out of college, but these questions become more relevant when you are more senior, and then because you come across these kinds of like scenarios in your day to day, and then you just have to think about these scenarios and then talk about them. uh, so I've talked about like how to give answers to these questions. I think the problem which I've typically seen, like people, they think like, okay, I might be able to think of something in the interview round itself and be able to answer it, but I think I've not seen people doing a very good job at that. So my advice would be to uh, like go through some material. I mean, I can share some questions on my Codementor profile, and then you can go through these questions and just prepare for it as you prepare for coding rounds and system design rounds. Uh, because it's very difficult to think of a good scenario on the spot unless and until, like, I mean, you already have gone through it multiple times. So I would advise just to kind of, I mean, you don't need to kind of memorize it by heart, but you can just on top of my mind think about, oh, this was the most challenging project which I worked on, and this there was a situation. Okay, if somebody asks me this thing, then I would kind of give this answer, and you can repeat the situations also. I mean, it's not a problem, but then you need to um kind of adapt that situation to the questions asked. uh, yeah, cool. Any questions on this? Okay, so yeah, should you stick to situations where you were successful? I mean, if obviously if the result was successful, then that's a better situation to be in any day. But I mean, if let's say you present the situation in a way where you can clearly show that you took the right set of actions, and then um, the result, if it was favorable or not favorable, I think that's not relevant. uh, these questions are more about like how your bias of action, your ownership, uh, how you are thinking as a leader, right? Like so and the focus is not about like what was the result eventually. It's more about how you tackle this whole scenario, and then what exactly happened. Were the set of actions which you took were right, or you could have done something better, and then to change the result which actually landed up. And one of the follow-up questions could be like, when let's say the result was not successful, one of the follow-up questions could be like, what else would you have done now that may have changed the result? So something like that. Yeah. Awesome. Okay, so mock interviews. I think like you did the coding rounds, you did behavioral prep, and then I mean, I'm not sure like this. Oh yes, I think like there's some confusion, but so I'll just talk about these things like system design. Like there's another round which typically is discussed, which is the system design interview. So what happens in this system design interview is this is more about, and this also gets asked, let's say when you are 4 to 5 years experienced or more. Um, so yeah, I mean, typically, like I think one of the attendees also asked this, like design Netflix. So here the focus is more about how well you understand systems. I mean, it's more about understanding traffic, priorities, understanding the high level design. I mean, and then let's say if 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 the interview asks you how would you design, let's say, Netflix, right? So you would ask some clarifying questions first. It could be, let's say, related to scale, traffic, how much traffic the system should handle, how many number of users are going to be there, um, like should it be a consistent system, should we be focusing more on consistency versus availability, so you would just try to understand like these, like your system's requirement, like what you're going to design. And then once you understand these requirements clearly, then you would want to understand the high level design of it. Basically, you would draw like different components and how these components are talking to each other. So this is like a high level design. And then, I mean, typically what happens is like the interviewer asks you to focus on one of the component, which is like the main component. And then you would drill down on that component. You would just write few APIs, like what kind of APIs will there be, uh, what's the functionality of this component. And then let's say if there were some other trade-offs which you might have thought of, then discuss these trade-offs. And then maybe like you use some database instead of like SQL, you use NoSQL. So why did you use NoSQL instead of SQL? uh, why would you use a caching mechanism in front of your database? So you need to discuss all these trade-offs. And like here again, like you need to discuss, it's like that's the number one thing, like you need to talk out loud and keep discussing with your interviewer. Um and then just come up with some numbers related to capacities. I mean, yeah, alternate architectures is like just discussing some trade-offs, like why didn't you go with some other architecture as compared to the one which you chose. uh, and then how would you scale the system up as the demand increases. And then communication, like communicate your thought processes. I think that that's really important. um, yeah, I mean, so this is typically going to be like one of the rounds in your four on-site rounds. Um, any questions on this? Cool. Yeah. So as I was talking, I mean, mock interviews. Like I think mock interviews are very helpful because um, being prepared is one thing, but then when I've seen like people going into the rounds and then they're I mean, there's a little bit of pressure. Maybe it's because of the company, or it's because of, I mean, not knowing what exactly is going to be there in the interview rounds. So I mean, mock interviews are a way to kind of um, release this pressure out. And when you actually go into this real interview, you would just feel as if you are like doing another mock interview. So I mean, I personally have benefited a lot from these mock interviews, and there are many good platforms which you can like go to. So there's Pramp, there's LeadCode as well. There's another website called interviewing.io and TripleByte. These are the ones which I have used, but I am sure like there would be other platforms as well which you can use, and then give 4 to 5 mock interviews. Uh, Give like different mock interviews, let's say 2 to 3 on coding rounds, 1 or 2 on behavioral rounds, 1 or 2 on system design. Get yourself comfortable. Uh, just clock your time. See like how much of time you're taking to solve each questions, and just think of that mock interview as a real interview. And then when you actually go to a real interview, you will not be like, I mean, you would already know what you need to be doing, instead of like doing, because I've seen many people, oh, I didn't have time, oh, already know the solution but I didn't have time, or maybe like I didn't know how to use some IDE for drawing the designs of like high level architecture. uh, I mean, so these kinds of problems you wouldn't get if, let's say, you do mock interviews. uh, yeah. Yes, so I think like once you have done your preparation, now how to kind of get like some interview calls, right? So I think the best thing which you can do is to reach out to your network or for referrals. Referrals obviously will get you the fastest call as compared to any other ways. I mean, I've seen people saying that, oh, I don't have any friends at any of these companies. How would I get a referral then? So, I mean, what you can do is you can go to LinkedIn, um, uh, search for jobs or search for people, go to like people from Facebook, send some requests, and then just draft out some message saying that, hey, I'm applying. I want to apply for a role, and would you be kind enough to like give me a referral? And maybe like out of 10 people, you would get one person who is happy to refer you. Uh, so I think like still there are many ways in which you can get a referral, even if your friends or family is not working at any of these companies. Uh, yeah, I mean, attending career fairs or company info sessions, directly applying on the website as well. I mean, that's also one of the ways you can get a call. Uh, and then, as I said, like reaching out to recruiters or company websites or friends on LinkedIn, having a good LinkedIn profile, and having a good resume. So these are all important for you to be like getting a call from one of the FAANG companies. Um Yeah, I think somebody asked me this before, like what kind of questions we should be asking. I think like these are all the things which I have already covered. Just kind of a summary. Communicating a thought process is really important. Like clearly explaining your logic, ask clarifying questions, write clean, organized code with good variable names and comments. So this is also important, like good variable names and having a good structured code with I don't think comments probably is too much, but yeah, having good variable names, writing good function names, um, making new functions wherever you can do, writing clean code. These are all like very important things. And then before you say that, okay, I have written this code, I would suggest you just test your code with some example, basically dry running your code and just making sure that your code passes through like two or three different what do you say examples, and then telling the interviewer that, okay, I think I'm confident that my code is ready. Checking edge cases, possibly like zero, negative, extremely large inputs, empty inputs, missing data, repeated elements, inputs that cause errors. Like these are very like general edge cases which I've seen, like which we should normally think about, and analyzing the efficiency and complexity. So this will be a follow up question in all of the FANG interview questions. They will ask you to compute the time complexity and the space complexity of the solution which you have written, and you should be able to do that. Um, and you can discuss multiple solutions, but I don't think you need to write it. You just need to write the optimal solution. Um yeah, so after finishing coding, walking through the inputs and the outputs, be confident. I mean, as I said, interviews are there to help you out. So if you don't understand, if you're not getting the question, just ask them, I mean, can you give me a hint or something like that. uh, Admit if you don't know something rather than try to fake it. And thank you, I mean, yeah, asking smart questions at the end of, yeah, so I think this is also important, like basically having prepared for 3 to 4 questions which you might be asking at the end of each interview round. uh, I think this gives an impression to the interviewer that the interviewee is well prepared and he's actually curious about the company. He's actually excited about joining this company. So I mean, you don't want to give another impression, right? So yeah. Yeah, I mean, working at FANG, I've already covered this fast-paced environment, smart co-workers, good tech, perks and benefits, working styles, high-impact projects. Um, I'm just running out of time, so I'm just kind of quickly going over these slides. And yeah, important tips that are often overlooked. Mock interviews, I've already covered like the importance of it. Application timing, yeah, I mean, when like these companies don't hire a lot, so whenever you think like the companies are hiring, do apply. Don't miss out on the chance. Soft skills, very important. I mean, for behavioral rounds especially. System design prep, matrix and data. So I've already covered this, like having these matrix on your resume with numbers and matrix. Research thoroughly, um, review basics, edge cases, ambiguities, and portfolio. Yeah, I mean, I've already covered all of these things in detail before. Awesome. So we are on the Q&A. Okay, I'll just go through questions. Okay, so Francisco has asked, how do you practice or study for system design? Um, so there are a lot of material which is available online, which you can um, go through. But I've personally found there's a course on educative.io, which is related to system design. I forgot the exact course name. But yeah, I mean, so that's very. I mean, for beginners, I mean that's very good. And then there's a book as well, which I can share after this video. I mean, I typically use these two things to go through system design, and then there are various blogs of companies which keep on writing their tech, like how they did this and that, and then I mean, you can just go through these material as well online. Um, how will I know if the design round is HLD or LLD before the interview? Yeah, I mean, you can just ask the HR what the design round will be based on. Um, I mean, you can ask the interviewer as well if he wants you to focus on HLD or LLD. HLD typically is more about how you place your load balancer, your caching, your databases, uh, your APIs, how they're interacting with each other, and stuff like that. So that's like on a high level how you're designing your system. LLD, it's more about your abstractions, basically your OOPS principles, right? Like your what kind of functions will there be in a class, what kind of attributes you will have, and then is it a composition or an abstraction or inheritance and things of that nature. So that's more like LLD. So you can easily differentiate between what the interviewer is asking you to do. Are system design questions somehow related to the field you apply for? For example, I don't know a lot about web technologies and scaling them. Are these also covered in lead code, and how do you practice them? Um, so I don't think it's related to the field you apply for. Um, I mean, these are very general questions. Like you can be asked design a Twitter system, and system design fundamentals. Uh, they can be applied to almost any system you might see. So there's nothing which is, uh, I mean, very specific to a particular field. You If you understand the fundamentals, then you would be able to apply those same fundamentals to any sort of system design or any sort of system which you are building. um, and I've already covered, like, so there is a discuss section on lead code, and many people discuss um, like some system designs on the discuss forum. Like if you go to lead code, there is a discuss tab, and then you can search for system design, and then many people are discussing, like, searching for system design, I mean, problems there. So that might be like something which you might be interested in. And they also keep sharing like some links or some articles which are good, so you might kind of go through them as well. Yes, I will be sharing the slide. um, I'm not sure like how Codementor works, but I'll just like put it in the what do you say, in the comments. Would it be a bad idea to connect with you on LinkedIn? No, not at all. What are the most accurate resources to draw from to get salary information about a company or a role? Resources to draw from. Okay. Yeah, I think there's a couple of websites which you can check. There's one called levels.fyi. So you can go there and check. I think it's pretty accurate. Then there's Glassdoor as well. There's Blind also. I mean, I don't know like how many of you are on Blind, but yeah, people keep discussing salaries over there. But yeah, I mean, I think the best tool to go is levels.fyi. What do you believe differentiated you from the other candidates? Uh, yeah, I don't think there's any differentiation between me. I think it's all about awareness. It's about knowing the right strategy to be able to prepare and then just like going for the interviews. I think it's a there's nothing like, I mean, like people who are in working in FAANG are different. I mean, it's a myth like that. It's all about practice. It's all about just knowing the right steps to be preparing correctly. Um, do they expect a salary negotiation at all for entry positions? Uh, I think this is a topic in itself. But typically, let's say if you have any competing offer, then you are in a position to negotiate. Uh, Otherwise, I think it's very difficult. I mean, to negotiate any offers. Yeah. What do you expect from someone reaching out to you for a referral? Yeah, I mean, why not? You can reach out to me for a referral. You can share your resume, and I will be happy to refer you as well. No problems at all. If you find any good job IDs, just share the job IDs and your resumes with me, and I'm happy to refer each one of you. Yeah, I think that's it. Perfect. Yeah, I think my LinkedIn is already there, or you can just like ping me on Codementor, and then basically, yeah. There's another question. If the team which I apply has majority of products in C++, will they prefer a candidate who interviews in C++, or it doesn't matter? Uh, Again, I don't think it matters, in especially in FANG. Like if let's say your resume gets selected, and if then you can use any language for like coding, and then there's a onboarding time in any of these companies. It's typically from 3 months to 6 months, so they expect you to kind of get onboarded onto the uh, tech stack, the different services which they are using, so you can just like start learning from there. Yeah, cool. I think I've taken some extra minutes, but I hope this was useful. And do feel free to ping me on LinkedIn or Codementor if there are any other questions. Thank you everyone. Thank you. See you. Bye bye.